I'm glad to welcome to the podcast a great friend of mine, Clint Greenleaf. I got to know Clint several years ago, and frankly, I was intimidated as I could be when I first went to meet Clint because if you read about him, you find out that he is an entrepreneur. He's had great success, and frankly, he does blogs. He's interviewed on TV. So, Clint, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. And I'm glad to know that I was a letdown after you met me. That's good to hear.
And that's not true at all. My feelings just got stronger and stronger. My belief in you got stronger and stronger. So thank you for that. I'd like you to just introduce yourself. You called yourself a recovering CPA, and I love your story. So would you just share your story with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I think recovering CPA is probably the best way to put it. I did that for a little while, but I've always been an entrepreneur. And I think if I were to really draw that arc out, I was trained with ROTC Marines in college, and then I got hurt. So I went into accounting, which was a natural next step, of course. And I didn't really enjoy accounting that much. I went and worked for 7 long, hard months as a staff accountant at Deloitte. I don't know that I showed enough aptitude. I did end up passing the CPA exam, so I got that designation. Wow. But there weren't a whole lot of people that thought the profession was weaker once I left. So I had written a book kind of as a joke and everything the Marines taught me about how to dress, how to tie a tie, and how to shine your shoes. And that book sold really well by my surprise. Well, this was 97, so it was still kind of in the early phases. E-commerce wasn't really a thing, so I was going to P.O. Box, picking up $5 checks through the mail, and then mailing out books. And so not knowing much about publishing, that kind of took off, and I thought, well, heck, I'll just start a publishing company. So above my parents' garage in 97, I started that and ran the company for 14 years, grew it into an Inc. 500 company, I think a 7-year Inc. 500 company run. We had 30 New York Times bestsellers. Wow. And then sold that company to a private equity firm in 2011.
Greenleaf Book Group. Is
That's
that right?
That's right. And they still exist to this day. A lot of my friends are still there working it. It's a great group of people and a good company as well.
Well, tell me what an entrepreneur is. I mean, tell a lawyer and people who listen to law podcasts, what is an entrepreneur?
Yeah. All right. So that's a really good question. And I guess I'll be honest with you and your audience and say an entrepreneur is someone who could not gain meaningful and continual employment through others. So we are the folks who will happily work 80 hours a week in order to avoid 40 hours a week of a real job.
Oh, that's so. This is someone who. These are the companies I know you've been a part of: Moonshot, Home Plate Peanut Butter, Tree Neutral, Bambino Balls, and Pigs and Bricks LLC. How do you pick names, by the way? What goes into your choosing a name for a company?
Well, that's a great question. I like to have a little bit of fun with it. So Moonshot is another baseball term for a home run. And that was the parent company of Home Plate Peanut Butter, which was a baseball-themed peanut butter. Got to start with some good friends, and that was a great brand. Really enjoyed that. Pigs and Bricks is tied to a children's book about teaching kids about money. And so based on the Three Little Pigs. And the idea is the Three Little Pigs had a business called Pigs and Bricks, where they were masons and built home builders. But it also is the building blocks of financial education for kids. So if I can have double or triple meanings in names, we like to do that.
And that's really cool. You've got 2 books you just did, and thank you for giving me an autographed copy of both. I was thrilled with that. And Give, Save, and Spend Beyond the Piggy Bank. So it seems that really drives you, is teaching children about financial matters. Is that right, Clint?
Yeah. So after I sold my first company, I was busy patting myself on the back. I was such a great father, and I'd done this great thing of selling a business. I decided to fly my kids out to Hawaii, and my daughters were 4 and 2, and my son was a newborn. And we were all sitting up in first class because I used all my points for it. And as I was busy breaking my elbow, patting myself on the back about how great of a father I was, I looked out back and kind of over their shoulders and saw the rest of the plane and thought, My kids don't really know that for about 15 years nonstop, I would fly in the middle seat in the back of the plane to save $10.
Right.
And they didn't know that I would try and stay in garbagey hotel rooms to save money to be able to do this. And if I'm not careful, they're going to be entitled and they're going to have this assumption of greatness, and they're not going to really appreciate it.
Right.
So I got scared and I did everything I could to read up on learning how to teach kids about money. And I found that I was hoping to find the silver bullet, right? I was looking for, give me that one trick or the 5-step process. And the problem is there's no silver bullet solution to it. It really comes down to each kid is different, each family is different, each set of circumstances is different. And so it's really about building out a strategy for it. So the first book, Give, Save, Spend with the 3 Little Pigs, is all about teaching little kids about the give, save, spend concept. So Dave Ramsey talks about that a lot, and it's really about teaching kids basically to budget in 3 buckets, right? Some for donations, some for saving for a rainy day, and some for spending on what they'd like. And then the Parent's Guide Beyond the Piggy Bank is a guide for teaching parents how they can customize their own plan for parents.
Well, that's great. And how's the book? How are those 2 books doing, Clint?
They're great, thanks. They've both won awards. They're both in their second editions.
Wow.
And during speeches, I'll often sell them as a bulk deal. So it's been a nice way to do that. This is really kind of my give back. I think that if we can help parents of means teach their children how to be financially responsible, we can make a better world for everybody. So I like teaching kids about money. That's kind of my heart's dream there.
Well, that's great. That fantastic. You blog for Inc.com and CNN Money. You're a regular guest host on Fox Business Network. Have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Inc. magazine, Fox, CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, Money magazine, Men's Health, and Forbes. So when do you do all this, Clint?
Well, a lot of that's having good friends in media, and they just kind of need a talking head. The first Wall Street Journal mention I got, to give you an idea how that works, I had a friend who knew that I wrote this book on how to dress, right? The first one that I did, Tips and Tricks from the Marines. And he said, look, I'm looking for a soundbite from somebody to say that now that smoking is no longer a thing, people are apparently popping Altoids during business meetings. So instead of smoking a cigarette, they're going to have an Altoid. So can you give me a quote on something of that line? And I was talking to the reporter and I said, yeah, Altoids are the new cigarettes. And after meetings, people pop Altoids. He's like, perfect, thanks. The next day I was on page B1 of the Journal quoting business etiquette expert Clint Greenleaf talking about the concept.
Outstanding.
And so to be fair, I've been mentioned in a lot of places. It doesn't mean that I really know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, I just get spoon-fed what to say and then say it in front of the reporters. But I do like to try and share what we know. And when a reporter asks questions, we like to be able to share that. I think that's something that lawyers to your audience can really focus on, right? So you're subject matter experts and you don't need to know everything, but if you know something very specific and you know a niche, you can be very useful and you can use that value of the media to help promote yourself in the process.
Well, and I had the opportunity to serve on a board with Clint, and he's got great humility. But really, the reason that is asked to talk a lot or be interviewed a lot is because you're very good at what you do, but the humility allows you to communicate very well, and that's just outstanding. But I appreciate your humility. Tell me about leadership, Clint.
Well, that's a much harder area. I can fake humility. It's harder to fake leadership, I found. It is an ever evolving process. A lot of the tips and ideas that I learned at a young age, I've had to refine over time. I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with some really, really good, smart people. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to lead really great, talented folks than it is people who need help. In my experience, at least, I think the best thing that a smart leader or business person can do is hire the best possible people and then just get out of their way.
So what does that push on? Go into that a little deeper, Clint, because I think that's a great point. Hire good people and get out of their way. But how's that leadership? Tell me how that works as leadership.
Well, the first step in that obviously is the HR side of picking good, intelligent people to be able to run the job. And another step of a leader is not to micromanage folks. And I've often said, I've got two switches when I'm talking to a new employee. I've said I've got two switches. I've got the ability to grind every little detail that you do. And I can drive both of us very quickly, very crazy if I do that. Or I can be aloof and trust that you know what you're doing, get out of your way and let you do your job. I don't have a middle ground, right? There's no gray in that spot. So either I am going to be terribly annoying to both of us, or I'm going to get out of your way and let you do your job. So I like to lead by giving people a little more freedom and a little more rope to work on their own.
Okay, but with your success, Clint, and you have had success, how is it that it's hard to let go? If you've had success and your formula works, whatever business that may be in, how do you pull back and let someone else do it? Because someone else is not going to do it exactly like you do or would do or how you would want it done.
Absolutely. That was a big lesson for me, right? What I've also found, though, is not that they won't do it the way that I want to do it. They'll do it differently, but many times, in most cases, actually, they'll do it better. They'll do it a little bit differently. So if I ask somebody to do a very specific job, let's say I want some landscaping done around the house, and I say, I want you to plant this tree right here. That's a very specific job.
Right.
But in most cases, I would be better off, to use this analogy, to go to a landscaper who's been a professional for many, many years and say, I want a beautiful backyard. And rather than decide that I want this persimmon tree right here in this exact spot, maybe the better bet is to let them come up with their own idea. And so in my experience, giving them the freedom to do that, as long as I pick correctly on the front end, and then give them the big picture view, right? So the first step is you pick the right people. The second step is you're very clear on what you want done, but not on the detail side, much more on what you want done big picture. So 5 years from now, what do I expect? I don't really care where that one tree goes. I don't care what kind of tree it is, but I want to be able to play catch with my kids in the backyard and feel like this is a nice home area, right? So if I can explain that well to a qualified person, then I just get out of the way and let them run their job.
Well, let me test. Job of an attorney is to try to test answers. So let me test you a little bit on that. One thing that I've noticed about you, and in the earlier part of this podcast, you were talking about you were going to write these books on children's finance, and so you read everything you could. You dove in, and so that's a lot of the step of getting involved as being a lawyer, being an entrepreneur, is learning as much as you can, going on somebody else's back. Abraham Lincoln talked about, why do you want to do something on your own when you can, actually it was Johnson, when you can use somebody else, their knowledge. And so my guess is a lot of times that you're hiring people to do work in an environment or on a project or on a proposed business that you've been in the books quite a bit. So your knowledge level is a lot higher than them. So how, help me square that issue of how you, having really looked into something and then find somebody that is going to work for you. How does that work?
I like that question. Let me try and refine or better explain where I was going with that. So for example, I don't need to become an expert in landscaping to hire that landscaper, right?
Right.
But if I know a heck of a lot about it, I might pick a very clear arborist and the world's best arborist to come in and put a tree if I know exactly what kind of tree I want. So for example, when we launched the peanut butter company, there were a lot of things I didn't know, right? I mean, I've been in books, I've been in peanut butter, I've been in baby clothing, children's financial education. I'm now on several different boards. I do a lot of things that I don't know very much about. So I like to find the subject matter experts and then build that. Now, if it's someone who is doing more of a rote job, someone on an entry level or an admin type role, there's a lot that we can teach them for sure. But my hope is to get someone who's really good and can own their area so that I don't need to teach them how to do the job.
So let's just assume that you have a position, and what are the primary traits that when you're fixing to hire someone, what are the primary traits that you look for, Clint?
I like someone who's really smart, and good at their job. I want someone who's a subject matter expert. I want someone who's willing to challenge me and can tell me when I've said or done something that's stupid, because that happens a lot. I appreciate your kind words, but there's no shortage of stupid that I can throw out there. And I really like when someone challenges me on that, right? So I don't need yes men. I had the privilege of marrying a redheaded Irish attorney, and I've gotten good at being challenged often by her when I make different statements, and I found that does a lot of good for me, because either I am so clearly galvanized in my position, and then I can teach somebody something, or I can explain that, well, maybe I do need to do some work on that and learn something. So when I'm hiring somebody, I like someone who's really bright, is willing to challenge me, and then can get on board with the big picture view. Because I don't mind, I don't have to have the ownership in my way if they're willing to go with me on the long-term view of the project.
Do you have any current challenges? I mean, it's current projects or current challenges, answer it however you want to, that you're really excited about right now. So it's just a shotgun question, but is there something that really just really challenges your thought process, you're really excited about? It may be personal, it may be more global.
Sure. I mean, well, so for example, we just bought a podcasting company as part of Content Capital, my current content business. And we know that it's not just about books. So my old company, Greenleaf Book Group, was focused on getting books in bookstores, and they still do that. The problem is, I don't really believe that bookstores are the future of sharing content. You know, you got Gutenberg in 1450 who put ink on paper. Mm-hmm. And then for about 550 years, nothing really happened, right? People put ink on paper and they put it out for sale and they bought it. But there are so many new and different ways to share content and consume it that I don't want to be just pushing out ink on paper books. So we bought a podcasting company. We're trying to integrate them right now. It's incredibly complex, right? Because podcasts can be used for business development. They can be used for advertising. They can be used to explain different ideas, and trying to learn that whole new way of sharing something that is kind of an asset, right? You've got content, which is this asset we all have. And then how do you monetize it the best way possible? The problem is there's no real clear-cut answer, because every answer depends on what the goal of the content provider is, right? So your podcast is to help teach people more about how lawyers can operate their businesses and how people can work with lawyers. Cool. Right. You selling Warby Parker ads on this podcast is not going to further your goal at all. So me trying to push that on you is an absolute waste of both of our times.
Right.
So how do I help you get what you want, which is to help you get greater content for lawyers so that they understand how brilliant you are? Cool. That's a very different goal. And that's still something that we're working on. We've got some great people on it right now, but it takes a lot of time to build out different systems for each new program like that.
You know, I like to listen to podcasts, and I just, you know, as starting this podcast, I wonder how in the world do you get people to listen, because there's so many of them, and we're just inundated. And yet I find when I'm walking, I love to listen to podcasts. I love to be challenged. Let me ask one more thing, and then I do want to talk a little bit about the law, but I want to talk about discipline a little bit. This is a guy that's had incredible success, and yet you drive a F-150 or F-150 pickup. Tell me what disciplines that you have for yourself that you think are important for entrepreneurs, or frankly for young lawyers or older lawyers or anybody that's in a business?
Well, I think it's really important to know what matters to you, right? So for me, I'm not trying to impress anybody with my truck, but I do like to use it for stuff. So if I'm going to go out and go hunting, or if I'm going to go out to a ranch and I want to be able to drive around, a small little sports car is not going to cut it. I've also found, because I'm just kind of a cheap guy like this, that I can fit out an F-150 very nicely and save a whole lot of money. So I don't need to impress anybody. My wife has her opinions of me no matter what car I drive, right? So the discipline for me is trying to create something of real value. I like to start businesses, I like to build them, I like to turn them into something meaningful. And so if it doesn't really further my goal, I don't like to waste a whole lot of time on it, right? I'm more than happy to maintain friendships with people who I like and who I think there's value in that. But I don't like to waste time on things that aren't going to bring value back to me. And I think that the more we can get refined, whether you're an attorney, an entrepreneur, or just a stay-at-home dad, no matter what it is that you're doing, if you focus your energy on something that furthers your long-term goal, I like to play the long game is what I call it, And if you can sit back on your rocking chair at age 114 or whatever it's going to be, and you're pleased with what you've done, awesome. That's a great goal, right? So what do you do to get there? And I like to usually use that metric, right? So I'm a crazy, grumpy old man dancing at my great grandkid's wedding. What did I do to be happy to do that, right? So I want to stay in shape. I want to eat well. I want to make sure I maintain my friendships with people I care about. I want to save money and invest it properly. And I want to be able to teach people so that I feel good about myself and others when I'm an old man.
Well, and frankly, I've got to give Clint credit for this podcast. As good as it may be, or as bad as it may be, this idea started with you, and you have part of your business, part of your thinking process is very unique ways to market different types of businesses. I think perhaps that's how you've been successful as an entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think there's generally the traditional way to knock down a brick wall, right? A lot of people like to run at it and decide I'm going to come up with a very specific business that everyone else has done before and I'm going to go do this. I like a slightly different model. So when Ross and Danny and I came up with this idea for home plate peanut butter, it wasn't just a better for you that tastes good peanut butter. It was also tied to baseball, and we were able to get it in every major league clubhouse. So we were able to use a very different, seemingly disconnected model to be able to market something and use it a little more effectively. I don't like just doing the same old, knocking on front doors. I think often the side door can work really well. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do something appropriately or correctly, but there's often a better way to go out and market. So for example, your ability to be able to get in front of not just lawyers, but people who are looking to hire lawyers through this podcast is a much better way to do it, because after the time is over, despite having me as a guest, after they've listened to several episodes, they'll know that you're way better than the average attorney. They'll understand that you have a great lock on how to work with fractional general counsels. They'll understand this model much better by having spent time with you.
Well, and so talk to me a little bit about your experience with attorneys through the years, Clint, and what has been good and what has been bad, and what your goal is currently when you have one of your businesses is looking for an attorney. What is it that you look for, and what is it that both good and bad, I suppose?
I should preface all this by saying again that I married a redheaded Irish attorney.
And so you know all the tricks.
Well, I know some of the tricks. I know that I like to talk to her first before I do anything. And she's done transactional work. She's done a lot of corporate work. So there are areas where she's an expert.
Right.
I'm generally a fan of trying to walk an attorney through my big picture goal, right? I understand that I bring a series of historical markers into every meeting. So I like to be very clear up front and say, listen, I do not want to spend more money than I need to, but I don't want to cheap out, right? So, right. For example, a frivolous lawsuit comes in. I do want to win if I'm going to go to court. At the same time, it might not be intelligent for me to go to court. So I expect an attorney who's a subject matter expert to say, that's a stupid idea. Don't fight this because it's going to be bad. Or we need to make an example out of this guy. Let's go to the mat and be able to do it, right? So those lessons are things that I expect to have an intelligent attorney be able to come help me do. I think all too often lawyers in practice are trying to make sure they protect their downside risk first. They protect the client's downside risk second, and then they do what the client wants third. And I think that's important to have all three of those elements there. But in many cases, if the attorney listens to what the client wants and says, well, that kind of goes against what I think I need to do, there's real value in being able to say, I need to protect myself, make sure that I'm not open to malpractice. I need to protect you to make sure that you don't make stupid choices. But what you're asking for doesn't really require an attorney, right? Or what you're asking for requires a sit down where all parties sit down at the table and try and hash this out like grown-ups. That kind of value, and in my experience, makes an attorney invaluable as opposed to someone who's charging by the hour.
Yeah, and I would like to digress just for a second, because there was an instance, Clint, where I really overbilled a client, because the first 10 years of my practice, I did litigation. And then for the last 20 years, I've done more transactional real estate, corporate law, mostly general counsel type work. But I tried a case in West Virginia, and after we won the case, we were interviewing the jury to ask, determine why we won. And the reason I say I really overbilled the client is because they said I won because of my Texas accent. So had I known that I just needed to get up and talk, I shouldn't have done any of that preparation. Through the 30 years of practice, Clint, what I found is sometimes the attorney and the client are not on the same page. There's a natural, based on the fee structure of how attorneys typically bill on an hourly basis. They discourage clients from calling, and also there's sometimes there's not a partnership. Entrepreneurs, you're looking for the bottom line. You're looking to make a profit in whatever endeavor you're doing. And also, typically, when you've called an attorney, you've had great success already, and so it's not the attorney's job to get into your business. It's the attorney's job to answer the questions or respond to the issues that you are talking about or you're concerned about. So tell me about. I've talked to you about the fractional general counsel, where I charge my clients a monthly fee for essentially being their general counsel. That's what I've done for 20 years. And for that, they can call as much as they want. I want to encourage them to call. In fact, I hope at the end of the month that I've given them more time than they've paid less than they would have paid had they been on an hourly fee basis. So, and I've talked to you about it. So, as an entrepreneur, what do you like about that model, and what concerns you about that model?
So I guess the only real concern is that I've overpaid, but frankly, a fractional GC makes a heck of a lot more sense to me as an insurance policy, right? Because this is something that I've struggled with a lot of times. I can luckily, walk down to my wife and chat with her for a few minutes and get a quick idea on it. Most people don't have that luxury.
Right.
I think it's kind of like having a really good friend who's a doctor, right? And you're going out to eat with your friend who's a doctor, and they say, you're having French fries and a fried egg and bacon on that burger. You might want to, 86 the fries and have some broccoli or something, right? You might want to try doing something better. We understand the risk, right? If I eat a ton of grease and carbs, it's probably not going to be healthy for me. But it's good to have someone kind of weigh in and say, these are the risk factors. If you're willing to assume those risks, hey, have at it. But generally, what you're doing is kind of risky, right? I think a good relationship with a fractional GC allows you to do that, where you can say, okay, so I understand your business model is X, and you believe that it's worthwhile to absorb these risks. Let's just be really clear about what they are, right? Your risk is that you default in the contract and that someone sues you for breach. Okay, probably not that bad. Versus your risk is treble damages, you go to jail for life, and somebody takes your F-150. Those are real risks for me, right? And so I like to know roughly, where are we on that scale? Is this I stub my toe, or is this I lose my leg, right? I like to have that idea. And I think by having a fractional relationship with a GC, you can pick up that call. You don't need to go through a long pre-call, because you already understand the business. So I can call you quickly. I can say, hey, here's a quick idea. Does this contract, this client seem like a good idea? And it allows you to do it a lot faster.
It's what you talked about some, Clint, I think is a relationship. And I was hired yesterday by a new business, and the first thing I told them is, listen, before we get going, I want to come out and see Home Plate Diner peanut butter. I want to see what you guys do. I want to see what you build. And getting to know the client allows me to know how Clint Greenleaf responds to things, how he wants his attorney to respond, and how he responds. Having your wife there, does that, and knowing you, does that help a long-term relationship with your wife? I mean, that's kind of a stupid question, but maybe I'm giving you some ability to suck up to your wife, Clint.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hugely valuable, and in areas where she knows what she's talking about, right? So in corporate transactional type stuff, you bet. Now, there are, like any good lawyer, she'll tell me the 398 areas she has no idea about. She'll say you have to talk to a professional, right? So in areas where I don't know somebody, it's wonderful to be able to have that experience. So I've got, Johnny, you're one of many good friends I like to sit down with and just shoot the breeze with. And if there's an area where I'm playing in the real estate space, that's not Kate's area, you can bet I'm going to call you and say, hey, can we chat about this? And if I need to give you some background, great. But generally speaking, you know enough about me to say that, okay, well, he likes to cover his backside, but he's not going to make totally stupid bets here as well. So let's try and figure out where in the risk spectrum this idea lies and where does it play. You can't do that if you don't know me and you don't know something about my business. So investing that time is incredibly valuable. And I love that you want to go out and see your clients, because it's really hard to provide useful data if you don't actually do that in the first place.
Well, and it also, it's particularly if we're looking at, typically we get to know clients on an hourly arrangement, frankly, at the beginning. But as we get to know what they do, that's important, because there's no way we can know, what the fee structure should be, frankly, unless we get to know their business. And so we get to know them. We get to know what type of business, what type of legal business they may need, in the frequency of that. And and every 6 months we analyze whether or not are you doing better or worse under this situation. But frankly, it's we can terminate it at any time. And I had a client, great friends from Andrews, and they were actually paying me a little bit more than what they would have been paying me on an hourly basis. And I called them and I said, you're paying too much. And he said, well,
I'm sorry, wait,
a
lawyer said those words?
That's right.
That doesn't sound right.
But what happened, Clint, is they were paying about $3,000 a month. In December, their bill would have been $16,000 because there was some end of the year stuff. And he called me and said, you know what, we're going to owe you more. And I said, no, you don't. We're in this partnership, and what we want to do is have great success. Clint, what do you think the 3 top qualities are needed for an attorney to be a partner with your businesses? If you were to try to think about what those would be.
Yeah, I think the first one is understanding the long game and the big picture goal, right? Like if you understand the vision and you can wrap your head around the ultimate goal, we might not pick the same path to get there, but at least we can understand how you're traveling, right? And if your short-term goal is to maximize billing, it's probably not my long-term goal, so it's probably not going to work out, right? So I think the first one's going to be that understanding of vision, right? And then I think there's going to be a cadence or personality fit that's really important too. Can I text you? Can I call you? Do we do everything over long-form written notes? So however we do that, make sure that we're kind of on the same page. And then I think the third is just raw competence, right? Like, you know what you're doing, or are you the real estate, divorce, personal injury, bankruptcy attorney, who's been at it for 6 months right out of law school? Like, it's hard to do all those things really, really well. So I think competence is really important. We tend to gloss over that, I think, and it's expected to be a prerequisite in a lot of cases. But I would love to know that my attorney's taken a bunch of CLE and focused a lot of energy on a specific niche area. So to your point previously, that I don't have to become the expert, right? I want to know that if there's ever anything related to a lawsuit with a REIT, that Johnny Merritt's done so many different reads on the documentation that's out there, that I can totally abdicate my knowledge base and say, if you know this, I don't have to, right? That's a true partnership where you don't have to worry about double checking each other. Competence is key, and I think it's undervalued in all too often nowadays.
Well, and I want to switch gears. How about COVID? Tell me, how entrepreneur? What do you think about reading the Wall Street Journal? Do you think things are going to go great? Are you nervous? What are you thinking?
I think I don't have a clue. We're about a year into this right now. Since we first heard what it was the virus that we didn't know anything about, and it's changed its name several times, and still COVID-19, even though it's 2021 right now. What I can tell you is that there's been massive disruption, right? I think the rate of disruption over the last 20 years has been greater than any time over human history. And then this was just a bunch of kerosene poured on top of the disruption fire that was going on. In my estimation, I guess probably late this year, we're probably going to start coming out of this as more people get vaccinated, as we start trying to find this. I don't know that there won't be another pandemic. I don't know that there won't be new malignant breakouts of different kinds of this. I think we've seen a lot of disruption. We've seen people leaving big cities and coming to Texas. I guess they've been going to Florida too, but everyone smart comes to Texas. But people are leaving, trying to find better lives for themselves. They're more accustomed to Zoom and Skype. They're willing to do things that are very different than they would do just a year ago.
Right.
And I think the idea that there will be disruption means there'll be winners and losers. It just kind of exacerbates both sides of that.
And you're going to hate me for this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, Clint, because you're a good enough friend. How about our divide in our country? I mean, what any thoughts on that?
I don't want to sound any older than I am, but I'll just say it makes me sad that we have such a big, wretched divide. It used to be, Johnny, that you'd say you're a Bud guy, I'd say I'm a Miller guy, and we'd go have a beer, right?
Right.
And now you say you're a Bud guy, and I say I hate you, I'm unfriending you, you smell funny, and I'm never talking to you again. And I'm gonna tell everybody I know that you're a horrible person, and I'm gonna try and cancel you, right?
Right.
I don't know how we can do a better job of reconnecting and finding that middle ground, or at least being able to disagree civilly by hating other people.
Right.
And I struggle with how we get back from this, because it seems like there's a lot of cases of severe and massive anger towards others. I don't know how we can do it without listening, and listening seems to be something we've stopped doing. But luckily, people are listening to this podcast right now, so maybe they're getting better at it already.
Well, this will show my age, which is, I don't know where it went, but I worked in Washington as a young man for a conservative Democrat. And he was a freshman Democrat, and he decided that it would be best to vote on the Reagan tax cut. And so he called Tip O'Neill and said, Speaker of the House at that time, and said, I'm going to vote with the Republicans on this. And but he wasn't, he still had success in Congress. But even more importantly, there would be times that we'd walk out of the congressional office building and would see police everywhere and would say, well, what's going on? And what was happening is the president was, the Republican president, Ronald Reagan, was in the speaker's offices, Tip O'Neill, having a drink. And so they could fight tooth and nail on policy, but they were still friends at the end of the day. So I share your thoughts, Clint. Thank you for that.
Johnny,
So
I'm a lifelong Cleveland Browns fan. I have a very good friend who's actually a Baltimore Ravens fan.
Oh.
And although he's got terrible judgment, obviously, because who roots for the Ravens except for horrible people, right? We're actually friends, right? And so if we know that we can both be football fans and we both like watching football, there's a hell of a lot more in common than the color of the shirts that we like to wear when we watch those games, right? And I think, to your point, the Reagan Tip O'Neill era is something I'd really like to get back to, especially if the long-term goals are something we're focused on, right? If the ultimate goal is to make the country better, yeah, we can pick different paths. That's okay. We don't need to be on the same exact path to do it.
Long-term goals. I love that, Clint. You've used that several times. Let me ask this final question that I always ask, and for the listener, sorry, I'm reading it, but I want to make sure that I say it correctly. In the spirit of shifting the law, what is your best advice for our current and aspiring law professional audience on how legal counsel can serve business clients, such as yourself, as principal partners and advisors, not just lawyers?
It's a great question. I think the best way to do it is to understand the ultimate goals of the business. If the ultimate long-term goal, the long game of that business is, for example, to be sold in 5 years, cool. You know exactly what to do, right? You know the foundation right now today this business has to have if they want to either IPO in 3 years or they want to sell to a strategic in 5 years. If you know the long-term goals, you can advise properly. And if you don't ask those questions, the entrepreneur is probably too ADD, based on, at least in my experience. I'm probably too ADD to tell you about it. So a really good lawyer says, okay, you're bringing me in to work on this one contract, but let's just take a quick pause. And I'm not going to bill you for your answer. So just speak freely for a little bit, right? And say, what do you want out of this business, right? And if the idea is, hey, I'm selling this thing tomorrow to my best friend and I just want to have this contract done so it's over, it's a very different contract than I want to sell this thing and IPO it in 5 years, because I've got to have a very different set of goals. So the lawyer who asks those questions and wants to know what a strong business will be in the future can actually provide much better services along the way.
What a great answer, Clint. For those listening, this is a great guy to listen to because of the success he's had. Very humble, but very successful. Clint, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. Good luck with all the future endeavors. This is great.
Thank you, pal.